The Monogatari series is the greatest anime media story ever created. Or is it? For all its magnificence, not everything in this story serves a primarily functional purpose to the narrative. Its visuals are, to say the least, extraordinarily beautiful, but dare I say they're predominantly geared towards aesthetic rather than the story itself. They serve in creating a specific atmospheric feel that matches whichever arc is currently in play. But what it's most known for, the dialogue, carries all of its interiority, so the visuals don't really have much work to do. Listen, I'm a Monogatari fan myself, but I'm only here to critique it. Yes, I am indeed part of the fandom that glazes it to oblivion, but I'm also blinded by a reverence that I refuse to see some of its shortcomings. The Monogatari series isn't the only story I'm going to be talking about today though. It's one part of a larger whole with regards to how a story's core affects the way it treats its visuals. I'm not here to attack the series, but rather to use it as an entry point into a much bigger question about what determines whether a story's visuals are decorative or functional. And to be honest, the Monogatari series is the least important story here in the grand scheme of things. You come to understand how as we explore this across 4 different chapters, tapping into Mono, Evangelion, and Scum's Wish. Before we go any further, I want to establish the actual crux of the video, and I want to be clear so that it doesn't come off as just a generic Monogatari critique piece. What is to be discussed is much, much bigger than that story, and to be frank, it's not necessarily about Monogatari at all. It's pretty interesting how this whole video's idea was born in the first place. It started as a character observation, a question of why the characters within the story do not have loaded messages transmitted through their faces and expressions in comparison to others. It was a bit perplexing considering how well crafted the story is in almost every other area. Most well-written stories do this, using their characters' faces and body language to tell you everything you need to know about their histories or psychological and emotional states. And since it relates to visuals, the things people see, it led to a much bigger question on how stories prioritize visual language depending on how they're trying to communicate their thematic messages. If you remember, and hopefully you do because it was like a few seconds ago, I mentioned that the Monogatari series' visuals are primarily aesthetic rather than functional. The key word here is primarily, i.e., I'm not implying they contribute nothing at all to the story. The visuals play a role in enhancing the narrative a considerable number of times across the story, but are chiefly for decorating or experimental purposes. Contributions to the narrative itself kind of take a back seat and most of the time feel like byproducts to the visual's primary focus. Though, like I said earlier, there are certain moments of heavy psychological and emotional weight where the visuals are all in service to enhancing those moments, but then again, they're mostly isolated. In essence, there are specific exceptions within a visual style whose main focus is to make the story more beautiful, more unique. But the real subject here is what the underlying principle in this approach by the Monogatari series reveals about storytelling within anime as a medium. What a story trusts to carry its meaning determines what its visuals end up doing. Depending on what's inherently the main vessel for a story's message, its visuals can play an extremely important or minimal role. As is well known, the Monogatari series is very dialogue-heavy, and that is predominantly how it explores its themes through its characters. The dialogue is its main vessel and it places complete trust in said vessel. With that in mind, its visuals have a lot more freedom to play around however they want to, which of course led to the pure aesthetic experimentation and uniqueness the series is known for. That whole concept of primary vessel for messaging is a benchmark we're going to be holding the other 2 shows against. The role Evangelion plays in this video is extremely important and gives a concrete definition of functional, which retroactively helps better understand Monogatari's position in this paradigm. Instead of just asserting that Evangelion performs functional storytelling, I want to prove it and actually show you what it looks like in practice. Director Anno built a specific visual language for this series, which both stemmed from his own creative mind and, of course, the financial constraints they had during its production, parts of which are even named after him till this day. The way he uses very tight framings that trap characters in constrained spaces kind of mirrors their psychological states of feeling limited in choices, essentially trapped. The visuals are inseparable from the underlying message and are so embedded in how he communicates the character's internal worlds. This is even more visible in arguably his most common technique, repeated static environmental shots of just nature, his characters being minute details with that empty space as the main backdrop, mirroring the psychological status for those involved in any scene where this technique is used. And it's used over and over again because of how effective it is in setting the mood and making you feel everything those characters are feeling, putting you inside that world with them. You're no longer a viewer but a comrade in their suffering. There's another side to him that likes showing close-up shots of eyes and hands during the most emotionally loaded moments. This does a lot to make the emotion bleed out of the screen into you, creating a much more immersive experience. Episodes 25 and 26 take all that, combine it and crank it to 11. When it comes to visual storytelling, those 2 episodes are the entirety of Evangelion in miniature. The entire structure is built around how much they can communicate Shinji's and the other characters' internal states through the things you see. The visual aesthetic was inseparable in messaging from Shinji's psychological collapse, and this was the running style in the whole series, played an essential part in getting messages across. They were literally embedded within the story's narrative, and so much would be lost without their presence. Not to mention all the different dimensions of symbolism, which I'm not really interested in, that directly tie back to the story's theological concepts. It just goes to show how impressive it is that Anno built an entire visual signature for this specific story alone, all in service to aid in how the narrative communicates with the audience. It was all custom-made, bespoke essentially, for what the story needed, and became a built-in part of what makes it so good. Riddle me this: what do you think happens if you strip away Evangelion's visual signature from the story? Do you think it would be the same story it is today? No, that's a serious question that I actually want you to contemplate with. Now, what am I trying to say with all this? Evangelion's visuals are an essential part of the story's very core, and it wouldn't properly function without them. Compare this to the Monogatari series, where if you strip away its visual flair, the story's message will still come across largely because of its reliance on the dialogue aspect. What the story trusts to carry its meaning determines what its visuals end up doing. Evangelion is the most extreme version of that philosophy, and it is only the second facet of 3 to be looked at. Scum Switch shows us another side of what it means to be visually functional. The difference here is how that functionality stems from the visuals doing less and not more, as opposed to Evangelion. To anyone who has watched Scum Switch, you'd most likely come to the conclusion that its minimalist, low-budget looking visual style was probably a financial compromise for the series. Nothing much happens visually. It's so simple and, in many ways, boring. But that's really not the case. The show's visual minimalism, from my view, is a deliberate choice, not a lack of effort, and reflects its thematic messages. Scum Switch is an extremely realistic story that portrays the ugliness of unrequited love and explores the human condition when it comes to emotions and relationships in general. It's extremely uncomfortable and hugely grounded on realism, displaying how these emotions and relationships are navigated in real life. With that being said, its visuals mirror what the story is about. Real life doesn't have over-the-top visual flair and polish, and so the anime doesn't either. The story simply portrays how everyday life is, while the visuals match that simplicity. I'd even go as far as to say that beautifying the story's visuals would completely go against everything it stands for. It would be a lie about what it's trying to explore. Toxic love and relationships are not beautiful, so why would the show's visuals be beautiful? Why would it flip its own central message on its head through how it looks to its audience? The story has a distinct style where it uses panel within panel or manga panel movements, essentially a frame within a frame, and it uses this over and over again, creating this fragmented look every now and then. This is the only show I've ever seen do this, and it gives it an idiosyncratic look, adding to how special it is as a story itself. Like I said, those manga panels give it a segmented look, and the smaller frames within the main ones project a sense of isolation. All that carries meaning and ties back to the show's emotional heart. Those fragmented frames carry these characters within them, essentially having them exist on isolated panels while on the same screen. This mirrors the show's thesis on how difficult it is to have genuine emotional connections inherently free of ugly human desires. Hanabi and Mugi's relationship exemplified this the most. They are living in the same world, sharing the same spaces, and yet they couldn't possibly be any further from sweet, genuine love and connection. The compartmentalized visual style is just an honest physical reflection of that. This is the other end of functionality, restraint. It's a complete opposite of Evangelion's heavy visual density, but they both follow the same underlying principle, using the visuals as an indispensable aspect of storytelling. There's still more to be said about how the Monogatari series handles this whole visual philosophy, and it's something I need to clarify so the whole video doesn't look like a blind critique on the show. Now that we've seen 2 different cases of visual functionality, we can return to the Monogatari series. The story's use of dialogue is really exceptional because almost every word said by each of those characters is already loaded. Everything it wants to say or explore, it does so through its dialogue. So when I critiqued its visuals being primarily for aesthetic purposes, that's only because the dialogues and monologues were doing every bit of work that would have been done by said visuals. It's not a flaw at all. Because of how much weight the dialogue carries, it allows the visuals to be free, which implores creativity from the production team. That then allows them to focus less on messaging and more on experimentation or aesthetic. Shaft's whole stylized visual language using abstract imagery, quick-fire text on screen, and those extreme angles do serve a purpose of story occasionally, but are mainly for atmosphere, not narrative pattern. This is not condemnation. It's not criticism. I'm just making an observation. In fact, if the dialogue was so good to the point where the visual didn't need to do much, that's commendable. The show achieves greatness without much reliance on visual storytelling. Shaft as a studio has proven it can execute visual storytelling to any degree it wants to through Madoka Magica. That just goes to prove that the studio wasn't limited in any way, but just trusted that the story could tell its story without needing its visuals to do so for it. Whether that's an achievement or just an excuse is up to you to decide. If you made it this far, then you most likely enjoy the content, so go ahead and subscribe and actually engage with the conversation. I really do want to know what you guys think of all this. As every story is unique, they all have different ways of getting their messages across to the audience. What they choose as the primary means to do that determines how much importance is allocated to the other forms of storytelling at their disposal. Visuals are just one way to immerse viewers, but are extremely important since it's the first point of contact with an anime. Whether a story decides to make use of it is entirely dependent on its narrative, but it is nonetheless an important part of what makes stories good. Understanding that the value of visuals depends on the story's main vessel for communication allows for a flexible approach to interpretation. At the end of the day, stories can still be masterpieces without relying on the visuals for aid. Any written form of storytelling is proof of that. This has been Tambe Brian. Thank you for watching.